So that comes from the Jewish writings called responsa.
For legal equality and dignity and so forth. All of that comes out of Jewish ethics.
And in Spain, the Christians called our people marranos, but a Jewish person would never call another Jew a pig or swine.
So Anousim means those who were compelled, and we should make clear to my audience that not all Jews were called marranos. Marrano was reserved for Jews, for those who had been Jews and now were perhaps hiding their Jewish identity, pretending to be Catholics, and maybe generations later they really did become Catholics. Hi, everybody. I am here with Yaffah Batya da Costa, a very important leader of the ANUSIM movement, which has to do with recovering for the Jewish nation lineages that have been lost as a result of forced conversions, persecutions, etc. And we're going to be talking to her about what this movement is, what it's doing, and what lies in the future. This is Management of Reality. Thank you for joining us. Yaffah Batya da Costa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I love talking about this topic. It's very important.
Okay, well, tell everybody what the meaning of the word is first. Anusim, where does that come from?
So that comes from the Jewish writings called responsa. And in Spain, the Christians called our people marranos and spat on the ground at the same time. Okay. It was an insult. It means pig or swine. But a Jewish person would never call another Jew a pig or swine. So in the responsa, they wrote bene, which means descendants, children or descendants of, and anusim. Think of a noose, like somebody strung up by a noose, right? Means forced or compelled. It's actually the modern day word in Hebrew for rape also.
Oh, I see. So Anusim means those who were compelled, and we should make clear to my audience that not all Jews were called marranos. Marrano was reserved for Jews, for those who had been Jews and now were perhaps hiding their Jewish identity, pretending to be Catholics, and maybe generations later they really did become Catholics. This is what happened in Spain, correct?
These were forced converts, but the Christians didn't believe their conversions were authentic. Well, how could they have been authentic if they were forced? So they were
But
right in a way.
But didn't Marrano apply to both categories?
No, just to the forced. No, the Spanish people, the Christians, Spanish Christians called the forced converted Jews, because now they're supposedly Christian. They
right,
called them that as an insult because they didn't believe the conversion was genuine.
right. But so people who had been forced to convert, some of them did become genuine Catholics, even if they were not believed or not fully accepted by older Catholics. But there were also some Marranos who did continue to who continued the Jewish faith in secret while publicly pretending to be Catholic to avoid persecution. This happened too, and they were also called Marranos, right?
That's correct. And what happened was in Spain, after the expulsion, they were given three choices: leave, convert, or die. So the ones who left. The ones who stayed, they had a choice of convert or die. So I would say probably most of them converted, but not necessarily in a genuine way. Half of the Jews, however, in Spain went over the border into Portugal. And 5 years later, the Portuguese king wanted to marry the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella. And those Catholic monarchs told him, well, if you want to marry our daughter, you have to get rid of your Jews like we got rid of ours. So he issued an expulsion edict. It's on record. They have the document. But he changed his mind. And 5 years later, when they were supposed to leave, and we have a lithograph of this, very nice, with so many thousands of Jews in the plaza in Porto, this port city, and the ships are out in the harbor waiting for them to get on board the ships. He changed his mind. He refused to let them leave, and they were all en masse forcibly converted by throwing holy water into the air over their heads in the plazas. They had
I
no
see.
choice. Okay. Yes,
I
and they were
see.
also called, of course, Maranos. Pig.
I
They
see.
were insulted all the time. Right.
Okay, and it happens throughout. As generation follows generation, some of these people eventually did lose their Judaism almost completely. Although it happens in some lineages and some families that this is relatively common. That some traditions were preserved that had to do, for example, with lighting the Shabbat candles and so forth. And people would keep doing these things as a family, it would keep getting passed down as a kind of a family heirloom, but
Right.
the meaning of it was lost. Just the conviction that it was important,
Not
and
across the
maybe
board. Not
no,
across the board. No, it is all differences in different families, and I've talked to people about this
right?
for 30 years. So
Hmm.
there's a huge spectrum, if you will, of
Tell
no
us about it.
knowledge, from no knowledge at all that these customs and traditions are Jewish, to actually having the Jewish identity passed down along with the customs. And in
Oh,
my family, I'm from one of these, by the way. I'm Portuguese. My mother's family was from the Portuguese Azores. Okay. My great grandmother was the classic crypto Jewish lady. The
hmm.
men knew, and the women didn't. The men, so my great
Huh.
grandmother, yeah, this is just my family. The great grandmother had 6 daughters and 1 son. Her oldest child was my grandmother, one of the girls. But the son was second or third child, I don't know. And he was of the generation of my grandmother, and he passed down to his son, which was my mother's generation, who passed down to his son, who is my generation. Okay.
Wow.
So when I came back from Israel one trip, and I'm not going to tell you the whole story about my coming back and return and everything,
Well,
but
maybe you will.
well, someday, but not today. It's too long a story. But when I came back from one trip to Israel and I met with this man from the World Jewish Congress who was talking to me about, why are you here? What's the thing for you? And he figured it out and told me the story of the Portuguese, because I never heard. See, in my growing up, whenever I heard the term Inquisition, it was always the Spanish Inquisition. I never heard there was a Portuguese side of it. Never.
Uh,
So I didn't know. I said to myself, well, I'm Portuguese, so close, but no cigar, right? Anyway, he told me the story and all this. And then now I'm really interested in looking into it. So I come back from that trip, and my mother's having a birthday party on the lawn, barbecue, and all her family, just her family. And so I take my cousin aside, the one in my generation, right? And I'm trying to be discreet. I'm trying to be gentle with him. I didn't want to freak him out. But I said to him, now, Joe, or Jose, did you know that our great grandmother, because we shared this great grandmother, did you know our great grandmother may have been Jewish? He goes, well, yeah. I said, what do you mean? Well, yeah. He said, in my family, he's talking about the male line, we called her Judeus, which in Portuguese means Jewish. They knew she was a Jew. And my uncle used to say that too, my mother's brother. So for some reason, the men knew it, but they didn't make a big deal of it. So, okay, she's a Jew. Big deal. So in some families, by the way, I'm the only one who came back. In some families, it's every single person in the family. And it's so
Wow.
strong. It's 3 or 4 generations all coming back, all of them.
And in many cases, these are people who had no knowledge that they were descended from Jews, but they find out, and it somehow changes their lives.
If they start to research, they find out. But I'll tell you why we don't know, okay? Unless the identity is passed down with that
Mhm.
term in Spanish or
Right.
Portuguese. The reason why is because one of the most common, I've never heard anybody in 30 years say they didn't have this custom.
Hmm.
So in these families, a huge custom was fear of outsiders,
Hmm.
and being raised with this mindset, this mindfulness. There's no such thing as friends. You can't trust anybody
Ah,
outside the family.
right.
So we didn't know Jews. We didn't know other people either, but we didn't know Jews, and we didn't know Jewish customs and traditions because we didn't have any interaction with people who were outside the family. That was verboten, that was forbidden, that was not allowed growing up.
Mm,
Okay. So you had
wow.
to actually be grown and then go out on your own and start doing whatever networking or having friends or whatever and figure it out, or start to actually, be with Jewish people. Oh, and the other thing was we weren't allowed to eat anybody's home. You couldn't eat food at
Hmm.
anybody's home except your mother or your cousins or your,
Ah,
family. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I got to trouble for that a lot of times, eating at a friend's house, even though we're also
well,
Portuguese.
what that suggests is that you are descended from a line of conscious crypto Jews. That they were in other words, they were still eating kosher and they didn't want to be discovered, and that was why they had a rule never to eat at anyone's home.
But they didn't tell you why. It's just
Right.
don't eat at somebody. You make an excuse. You say, "Oh, I have to go home. My mother's waiting for me. Oh, my mom
Right,
will be very."
because they didn't want the kids to have a Jewish identity. So the first generation, they would keep eating kosher, but they would tell the children, don't ever eat at anyone else's home. But they wouldn't tell them it's because you're Jewish, because they
No,
were trying to get the
because we
identity.
might because we might blab. We might say something.
Exactly,
Okay, we
exactly.
might repeat. So
That's
the
right.
persecution was 500 years, Francisco, from the 14th century to the 19th century. The last in the New World, the last killing of someone who was a secret Jew in Spain was in 1824, something like that. But the
I
very
think that
last,
was in Palma de Mallorca, actually.
it could have been, could have
Yeah.
been. But the last one in the New World was in Mexico City in
Mm.
1830. That was the
Wow.
last auto da fe, the 19th
Wow.
century. And people are still afraid today. In Mexico, in particular, if somebody, a cousin, second cousin, whatever, somebody in the family of a larger extended family wants to come out publicly, openly as a Jew, they'll try to convince him not to, because when somebody converts to Judaism, it's just for that person, doesn't affect anybody else in the family. It's
Mm.
conversion. You actually
Right.
come out of that family and join the family of Israel. Okay. But if you come back and you return as a Jew, your whole
Hmm.
family is implicated as being Jewish, and they
Right.
don't want,
You,
and they're
you
still fearful.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Well, especially in these times.
Oh yeah.
So now tell us, you're not going to tell us your whole story today, okay? But tell us one part of it, because I remember in another conversation that we had that you mentioned to me that before doing conversion you became a Noachide. Tell us about that. First, let me
Oh,
just tell everybody what a Noachide is really quick.
oh
So
yeah.
just
Go ahead.
so that because not everybody knows. So the Noachides are Gentiles, so they're not Jews. They are Goyim, who believe that Judaism is the true religion, and but they don't want to be Jews. Okay, so it's an interesting category. So you accept that the Torah is the book of God, that the God of Israel is the creator of the universe, that the Jews are the holy nation of God, and so forth. All of that you accept, but you don't want to become a Jew. So you stay a non-Jew, but you join the community of the Torah, so to speak. But you're not obligated to follow all of the rules that apply to the Jews, all of the commandments. So what apply to the Noachites are the 7 laws of Noach, which are the basic principles of ethics. And then you are enjoined to in the 7th law, you're enjoined to create a system of law that will be consistent with Jewish ethics, but it doesn't have to have all the specifics of Jewish law. So now, let me just make a full disclosure. I am a Noachide, and so I'm very sad to see that we lost Batya to the Noachide camp. But I'm glad to say that the Jewish nation gained a new member. That's also good. So
But
I
we're
have
so
no
close.
complaints.
But we're so close. You didn't lose me.
It's the same. It's the same complex community. Let's say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You just moved to a different house, but you're still in the neighborhood.
That's right. Actually. And the moral code is the same between the
Right.
Noahites and the
Right.
Jews, right?
Exactly.
Right. We have the
Exactly.
same morality, right?
Same morality.
Ethics.
We
Ethics,
share
right.
it with the Christians too.
Absolutely.
The Christians they're basically Noachides, except that they think the Jews are wrong.
About
Right.
you know who. I know. Right, right.
Right, right. But other than that, we share the same moral code, because it's a Jewish moral code. So it's you could say, I've said this in other spaces. I think Western civilization is basically a Noahide civilization. You could almost say that.
My friends who are Christian Zionists say, my best friend in that
Mhm.
arena says that Western civilization started out as Judeo-Christian, and she's correct.
That's right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. It's a
And the
Judeo-Christian.
founders and the founders of America were Judeo-Christian.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's a, it definitely the moral code that built Western civilization is a Judeo-Christian moral code. And if it were not for that moral code, we wouldn't have everything that we value in modern in the modern West. Our
Right.
democratic, humanitarian, compassionate, our search for justice,
Hmm.
for legal equality and dignity, and so forth. All of that comes out of Jewish ethics.
That's right. Right, right, exactly. So
Studio.
what happened so what happened to me was I was on a talk thing on the internet. It was before Facebook. It was called Pal Talk, and I
Mm,
went straight to a religion group in
I
there,
see. Uh-huh.
and I met some Noahides. Now I had been studying for a long time about Christianity because I wanted to figure out what was all this persecution about. Why? What happened? What? Okay. So I had done a lot of research already, and I was drawn to the Noahides. Okay, and I met, and he's still. This was 30 years ago, and I met. He's still a good friend today. Professor James Tabor of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, who was a professor of early Christianity for many years. He's
Okay.
now retired from that, but he's doing archaeology and doing other things. So we'd been talking, and there's a couple other guys who were Noahide, big. They were big on Noahide. So I told him I was going to Texas. I was going to live in because this is when I started figuring out. This was in '96. Started figuring out this is really who I am. I hadn't done all my research yet, and I hadn't returned yet, but this was where I was at with the
Hmm.
B'nai Noach and the B'nai Anousim. So he says to me one day, when are you driving? Because I was driving down 95 all the way down the East Coast, then over to Texas. He said, look, he said, on your trip, schedule it in a way that you can stay over in Chapel Hill. We'll have breakfast in the morning, then you go on your way. I said, okay, that's exactly what I did. So we met for the first time, but we'd been talking online. And he says to me at the end, he goes, I want to do something for you. I want to introduce you to my friend Vendel Jones in
Mm,
Texas and
hmm.
another friend of his in Houston, okay, which is another part of the story, but just Vendel. And I'd been doing a radio show on Christian radio, which he knew about. It was a live call-in radio show, and I would do the Parsha of the week. This is for Christians, Parsha of the week for
Hmm.
40
Hmm.
minutes, and then I would open up the call-in lines for people to ask me any questions they wanted. So he knew I
So
was doing
just
this.
to be clear, this is what is often called in the scholarly literature. It's called they're called Judaizing Christians. That's a common term. These are Christian communities that get very interested in the what Christians call the Old Testament, which is the
Right,
Hebrew Bible that they share with the Jews, and they get very interested in that because they are very interested in the Jewish dimension in the life of Jesus. So.
right. But the replacement theology people hate it.
Right,
The,
right, right.
they're
Yes,
the
of course,
ones
of
who
course.
go after
Yes,
them
yes.
and say, okay,
That's
all
the
right.
fight. Yeah.
And Judaizing is a negative term, actually. What they're saying about the Christians who are into this is they're trying to make Christianity more Jewish.
Right.
But oh, by the way, it was in the first century. So that's the whole problem. They don't accept that. They don't
Yeah.
want to have anything to do. Okay. So anyway, and my friend James Tabor knew about this. He said, "You would want to meet Vendel Jones, and he would because he's a Noahide, a big Noah. He was a pastor. He was a Christian pastor originally. His whole congregation came out of it and either converted to Judaism or became Noahide, either one. But
And
he,
how many people are we talking about there, Yafa?
I don't know, I don't remember that
Okay.
number of his Christian congregation, But he became very big name. And some people say the movies about Indiana Jones were loosely about his life because he was looking for the Ark of the Covenant at Qumran. Okay. Anyway, he was a
Mhm.
very colorful character. He lived in Israel for many years. His children grew up here in Israel and all this stuff. And he was a wonderful guy. He's Nifter now. So James says to me, "You should meet him. I'm sure he wants to meet you." And what happened was, not only did we meet and have a great conversation, developed a friendship, I started teaching Torah to the Noahides at Bendel's Institute with him and Jim Long, his videographer, for about 4 years, and
Oh
it was
wow.
a it was a fabulous time, just a fabulous time. And that was kind of like an adjunct to my radio show. I also actually brought the radio show from New England to Texas and put it on one Christian station in Texas, but that was just like an extension of that. Okay, and some of the people that used to
Okay.
listen to the radio show would start going to Vendel's on that certain day whenever we would, have those meetings and stuff. It was a lot of fun. The people were fantastic. It was just great. So that's how I became, and I said to myself, I didn't know yet that I had Jewish ancestry. And I said to myself, "Bad Noach, that's okay for me. That's
Good.
good." I was happy, That would have been fine. But then I found out I had Jewish ancestry, and that took me on another path.
And it just pulled you. It pulled you. It pulled you all the
Ah,
way in.
I was like in quicksand, It's like you can't get
Uh-huh.
out of it. You just
That's it.
because it's some people say it's actually it gets buried in the DNA. Now I don't know about that, but
No, I don't think so. I think it's a cultural affinity. You just liked it. It's okay.
oh,
You're allowed to just like it. You know.
well, I say it's Hashem, and that Hashem chooses the people he wants to, you know, come into that or be a
I think we can
Noahide.
make our own choices too. I think that's part of what Hashem bestowed on us is the ability to make our own choices,
Oh yeah,
and
oh yeah,
that's different from believing in fate, right? I mean, or believing that everything that happens is determined by some higher power. We have the power to make our own choices. That's what
we do,
the
we
that's
do.
what the entire point of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil
Yeah,
mean, right? Once you eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you know the difference between good and evil.
but you
And
still
if
have
you
a
know the
choice.
difference, then you are free to choose, right?
Yeah, you do.
Exactly.
But there's an expression that I really like in particular that says, I forget where I got it, that says, God puts into our heart the desires that he wants us to have, and then he gives us the desires of our heart. So
Well,
it's not to say
I
he
think
takes free will. It doesn't say it takes free will away from us.
no,
I know where you're coming from.
I know, any
I know.
any interpretation that says that everything is determined sort of removes meaning. I mean, if we're not making choices, then it's just
It's
some
both.
kind of show,
No, no, no.
right?
In Judaism it's both.
Well, no,
It's
no. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. If you say it's both, you are in a paradox. What you can say, and I think actually, because I'm gonna be talking about Shavuot in a second.
I know.
What you can say is that God makes an offer, and you're free to refuse it. You're
Yes.
always free to refuse it.
Absolutely.
So yeah. And it also happens that through no fault of our own, certain things happen. That's also true. We shouldn't remove that from the equation, right?
True.
Um,
That's true.
so anyway, but I want you to tell us about Anusim because we need to get to this. So
Okay.
there is tell us about the organizations you work with and the worldwide movement to recover Anusim for the Jewish nation, and how is that going on in the context of the tremendous rise of anti-Semitism that we're living through?
Well, so what happened was I made my own return starting in 2000 with a Beit Din in New York. And then I made Aliyah on that return certificate to Israel in 2004 in August. And in January of 2005, I started my nonprofit in Israel. It's called an
Mm,
Amutah. And so it took me about 10 years because there was a lot of stuff going on. In the meantime, I got married and blah, blah, blah. But what happened was in 2015, there was a meeting at the Knesset. There was an MK at the time who wanted to start a caucus, a lobby group at the Knesset for Anousim.
mm,
Okay. And so he had this big meeting. There were about 300 people there. A lot of people spoke, and I was there, and da da da. People who are from the B'nai Anousim or helping the B'nai Anousim. In my case, it's both. So there was this meeting. There was a guy who was working with the MK, and I started working with him, but that only lasted for a few months. But then I decided that I needed to go back and really be more public, because I was asked for 10 years to not be public for a while, for actually 10 years, which I did, because
Who
there's
asked you?
a major rabbi,
Huh.
because somebody had threatened me.
Huh.
Yeah. So he said,
But threatened you? Why? What?
because I was promoting his return certificate, of people could return, and there are certain Jews that don't accept return. They don't accept
Oh,
somebody can come back. They say this is the
uh,
Haredi position. The ultra Orthodox position is everybody has to fully convert from scratch, like they're a non-Jew, like they don't even have Jewish
oh,
ancestries.
I see. So when you go through this process, so if you are considered to be Anusim, there are certain steps in the conversion process that you
No,
are not required to make.
that's the whole point. You're not, if you have strong enough evidence or even
I,
proof,
I
you
see.
don't convert, you return. It's called return in English, Giyur l'chumrah in Hebrew.
Okay, but this means that you don't have to study the
Don't
law,
convert.
give
No, no,
evidence
no.
that you know the law.
You have to do everything like a convert,
Oh,
because
I
you're going to
see.
be a Jew. So you have to learn, but there's two major differences. One, they don't tell you to break Shabbat until you go into the mikvah.
Okay.
But for a convert, they have to break Shabbat. Do one thing every Shabbat that breaks Shabbat. They can't observe it the way we
What do you mean
Jews.
by break Shabbat?
Turn on a switch, turn a light switch on, do
Okay.
some kind of creative work that we're not allowed to do on Shabbat.
Ah,
Just
I
break
see.
it somehow.
To keep the difference,
Yeah, because they're not
to
Jewish yet, so they're not
mark the
obligated.
difference. I
Yeah,
see. I see.
there's no obligation yet. Okay.
So you're
So
required to break Shabbat. It's a way of
if you're
symbolically.
if you're from a strictly Goyish, or
Right.
background,
I just want to make it clear because
you're
remember,
required.
not everybody who's listening to us has
Yeah,
the same cultural background. So
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
always trying to be a good anthropologist and communicate. Okay.
Right,
So what Yafa is saying is when you are a true goy, in other words, you're truly a non-Jew. You're not descended from some lineage that was forcibly converted, right?
right, right,
So when you're a non-Jew, a real non-Jew, let us say, then in the process of conversion, leading up to the actual ritual, uh, you may start doing some things as a Jew. You start studying and all this stuff, but the rabbis require you to violate the rules of Shabbat in some way in order to mark yourself as a non-Jew until you get to the final ceremony where you convert. Did I explain
correct.
this correctly?
Absolutely, 100%. But not all rabbis do that, but most of them do. If
Okay,
we the dispute between, okay.
got it.
But somebody who's from the B'nai Anusim and is going to be studying and learning and doing everything towards their return process, which is not a conversion. That's why we call it return.
Right,
It's
right.
different. They don't tell us to break Shabbat because we're assumed to be still Jewish
Mm,
already. You
I
can't have a
see.
Jew tell another Jew to break Shabbat.
So
That's
it's
the
a
one
way of
major.
telling, it's a way of saying to this person, look, we understand that you're already in. We're just we just have to prepare you for a full Jewish life. But we already accept you as part of the community. That's sort of the symbolism here.
Technically, we are Baal Tshuva, just like any regular Jew born of a Jewish
Exactly.
mother who wasn't raised Jewishly, okay,
I
wasn't
see.
raised totally as a Jew. They come back as a Baal Tshuva. We are technically Baal Tshuva also.
Excellent. I see.
Okay, now
So can you
the other
explain the meaning of Baal Tshuva for us?
Baal Tshuva is somebody who returns. Tshuva
Well,
means return. It also means repentance. Somebody
okay.
who's repented of an earlier lifestyle of not being observant, and now they're going to learn and be observant of the whole Torah.
And the word Baal means
Baal is
Baal
master of repentance. Baal, tshuva, master of repentance.
and or return.
Or it also means returning to God through your observance of the Torah. So
Got
the second major difference is when we go into the mikveh as a returnee for the B'nai Anusim, we don't say the blessing that the convert says because we're not a convert.
right,
Now, when a convert goes into the waters of the mikveh, they're changing their status from
right.
non-Jew to Jew. But for a
This is
return,
analogous to what the Christians call baptism. It
yeah,
has that function. Yeah,
Right.
and actually, it shares with Christian baptism that there's water, dunking in water is involved, right?
And there's this idea of being born again or born of
Right,
the
exactly.
Spirit. Yeah,
Has all
very
those
similar.
parallels with Christian
Ve-
baptism. In
Very, very
fact,
similar.
very obviously, Christian baptism comes out of this because
Right.
the Jewish tradition is older, right?
Yeah, absolutely. John the Baptist, people would know this as what John the Baptist was doing in baptizing people or
Exactly.
immersing people is a better
Exactly,
term.
exactly.
Right, right, right.
Right.
So,
It was part of the process. In ancient times, the dunking in water was part of the normal process of converting non-Jews into Jews.
right,
And this is how the practice of baptism that we see in the figure of John the Baptist,
right.
that's how this gets adopted into Christianity.
Right, right, right.
Right.
So the thing is, and they say a blessing in thanking God for this change in status. Well, we can't say that blessing because our status isn't changing. We're a Jew. We're accepted as a Jew. We're still a
Right.
Jew. So
Right.
we can't say that blessing because it would be a blessing said in vain, which
Hmm.
according to the Torah is a sin. You can't do that. Especially
Okay.
you can't have one Jew telling another Jew to say a blessing in vain. Okay. So we say a different blessing. We say a blessing called
I am
Shehecheyanu.
reminded. I am reminded of another aspect of this symbolism. In many contexts, when I participate with Jews, for example, when I go to Kabbalat Shabbat at some of my friends' synagogues,
Uh-huh.
uh, it happens that I am always asked to wear a kippah inside the synagogue. So they like the fact that goyim who share the service with them at the synagogue wear a kippah like any Jew. But at the ceremony where Rabbi Sherki was kind enough to initiate me into the B'nai Noach, at that ceremony, I was explicitly told not to wear a kippah because in that ceremony, since I am Ben Noach, I'm making my acceptance of the seventh laws before the rabbinical court, right? I'm making my
Right,
acceptance public in the court. Uh, it is very important that I be marked as a non-Jew because that's the
right,
entire point of the category. So
right.
anyway, just to
Yeah,
further round out the cultural context of these kinds of markings, which are very interesting.
and not only that, if a Ben Noah goes to a synagogue, somebody has and he wears the kippah, somebody has to tell the gabbai that he's not a Jew, so he doesn't get counted for the minyan, and he doesn't get called
Ah,
to the Torah to do the
I
blessing,
see.
the Torah.
Oh,
So they
okay.
have to
So
know.
wait, I didn't know that one. So when I go to the synagogue, I have to tell them.
Yeah,
But at every synagogue I've been, there's more than enough people for the minyan.
doesn't matter. It doesn't
Oh,
matter. They have
okay.
to know you're not a Jew for those 2 I'm just telling you the 2
For those
reasons
two
typically.
reasons. Okay.
If it was a very small group, it would be even more
Yeah, if
important,
it were of course, of course.
but they cannot call you to the Torah to give a blessing of the Torah because you're not a Jew. So somebody needs to tell the goodbye. That's all. Yourself or a friend of yours
Mm.
who brought you there who knows the goodbye, whoever it is would tell the goodbye that you're not
I'll
a
make
Jew.
sure that I do that next time.
Yeah,
Good to know.
it's just
Good
like
to know.
a protocol. Yeah,
And
yeah.
explain to our public who is the gabbai.
The goodbye is like the guy who calls people to the Torah, the guy who counts heads, see if there's 10 million and everything. He's
So
the
he's
assistant
a
to
kind of a master of ceremonies at the
Yeah,
synagogue.
yeah, 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 he's the assistant to the rabbi, yeah, but that's his function, yeah, yeah, and he
Got it.
should know everybody and who everybody is and all this stuff. So, but the thing is, for the returning B'nai Anusim or secret Jews who are coming back, okay, they have to make this clear in what's called Dati Leumi, the religious nationalist segment of Orthodox Jewry, different from the ultra-Orthodox,
Tell us
okay?
what the differences are, Yafa, please, because people don't know this.
Ultra-Orthodox takes on additional, they call them lachumra, additional observances that regular Torah observant Orthodox, but regular Torah observant Jews don't do. It's additional stuff.
Can you give us
Um,
an example?
well, so for example, over Pesach, you have to cover a lot of your utensils and stuff with foil to make sure it
Mhm.
doesn't come in contact with the ceramic or any other things that could have absorbed, you know, hummus, whatever.
Yeah, they might be
These
polluted by flour.
Yeah, but it's just a precaution. You just cover everything. We've had pictures of people covering the toilet with. It's funny. It's a joke. Covering all the toilet stuff, everything with aluminum foil.
Okay.
No, because we laugh every Passover. What these people will do is they'll take out the inner thing of a kumkum. It's all
Uh-huh.
metal, right? They'll take out
Okay.
the inner one, cover it in foil, and put it back in.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm just saying, it's just additional stuff that
Okay.
to other
And
people looks crazy.
the religious nationalists.
And the religious nationalists don't do all those additional things. We are straight Torah, written law, oral law, midrash,
Oh,
all
in
that.
other words, the distinction is, if I may put it in simple terms, the religious nationalists are very serious about following the Torah, but they think that maybe the ultra orthodox are taking it are
A little too,
inventing rules that are not necessary,
and they're taking it a little too far. A
who
little
taking
too
it too
far
far.
and making it a little too hard for
Okay,
people.
but it would be false to say that the religious nationalists are not completely Torah observant.
That would be a false statement, correct.
Right.
They're completely religiously observant, absolute Torah
Okay.
observant, right, exactly. Okay,
Okay.
so, and they are the rabbis who will work with our people as a returnee, whereas the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredi, say, no, you have to, it's been 500 years, they have all these reasons. There's no such thing as, I've had Haredi rabbis say to me, there's no such thing as Anousim. Nobody was forced, everybody took it on. They don't believe in the stories of the B'nai Anousim and the customs and traditions that were handed down and all that stuff. They don't want to hear it. They say that. I
So,
don't want to hear
i-
stories.
is there an armed struggle going on between the ultra orthodox and the religious nationalists?
Absolutely not.
There
Absolutely.
aren't any terrorist ultra orthodox groups who put bombs in religious nationalist synagogues. That's not going on.
No.
There aren't any street fights with knives and guns between religious nationalists and ultra orthodox Jews.
No. The
None of
only
that is going on. So there's no actual physical violence going on between these groups who disagree, which disagree so profoundly on questions of Torah observance. Yet there
so
is no violence between them. Is that true?
correct. So
Huh.
here's the thing. It's a community thing. You choose the community you identify with, and you identify with them wholly, totally. And these other communities, you're respectful to them. You may disagree with them. They may talk to each other and just, oh, they'll argue about this, that. Okay, so they may do that. Arguing points of law, Jewish law, halakha, all this stuff, history, whatever.
Wait a minute. Are you saying it would be fair to say that the ultra orthodox and the religious nationalists have respect for each other, even though they completely disagree on fundamental questions of Torah observance? Are you saying
No,
that
they
they
don't
completely respect
disagree
each
on
other?
fundamentals. They don't disagree on fundamentals. They
They
disagree
don't
on the
disagree.
additions, on the additional stuff that the
Oh,
Haredi
I
take
see.
on. That's what
So
they take on.
the things they disagree on, you would not call them fundamental, and neither would they.
Right, right.
I
There's not the fundamentals. Everybody knows what the Torah is, the written Torah, the oral Torah.
So what are
No,
the
no.
fundamentals? How would you categorize the core that is fundamental that they don't disagree about?
Torah, prophets, and writings, what we call Tanakh, the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, nobody disagrees on. Okay? Some of the Midrashim, some people take it more strongly than others. Midrash are writings on the Torah and the oral law. Some of the history, maybe some finer points that people might disagree, Jewish history. Um, no, it's minor stuff to us. Also, the concept of Mashiach is not a huge concept within the Jewish world, and I'll tell you why. It's a prophecy. We know it's going to happen. We just don't know when, and we don't know who it's going to be. And anybody who wants to say, well, it's going to be the Lubavitcher Rebbe returned because he's now dead, or it's going to be Bar Kokhba. These are figures in Jewish history. Or it's going to be, it could be, they say it's the man from Nazareth, but it's all speculation. And to us, speculation is nothing to fight over or argue over because nobody knows. Nobody knows. So it's not a big deal to us. So when Christians who are so committed and dedicated to their belief, which I would call speculation, that the man from Nazareth is the Jewish Messiah. When they come to Israel and they're trying to convert us to Christianity, us Jews, to become Christians, it's like, we're fine the way we are. What's your problem? Oh, but you don't believe in, you know who. Yeah, but it's all speculation. And he didn't fulfill the prophecies that are in the Hebrew Bible of what the Messiah is supposed to do. So all the more so. Neither did Bar Kochba, neither did the Rebbe. You know, all these people. Nobody has fulfilled those prophecies yet. So we don't believe in anybody.
So to be clear, the prophecies that were not fulfilled were the expectation that the Jews had that that Mashiach would liberate the entire planet from slavery and would establish the Torah for the entire human species so that we can all be free. That
And build the third
hasn't
temple.
happened.
And build
That
the third
hasn't happened.
temple.
Right, and rebuild the third temple. Exactly. So that it seems to me that the Jewish concept of Mashiach is importantly political and legal. That's one thing, and also it has to do with a redemption here on earth, a sociological, political redemption here on earth.
Right.
And it seems to me that the Jewish concept of Mashiach is retrospective. In other words, you identify who is Mashiach once he's won, because before he wins, how could you know that it's him, right?
You identify who he is by what he does.
Exactly. So if he hasn't won, then you can't know who it is.
Yeah, you can speculate and
Right?
say, well, he died, but he's going to come back and do those things. And then us Jews will say, okay, so when he comes back, if that's him, who it is, who does those things in some time in the future, okay, then people would believe in him, but not now. We don't believe in him right now. We don't believe in anybody right now as the person who's going to be the Messiah. Right.
Yaffah, we have run out of time right when it was getting really exciting. So because I love to wade straight into the most incredible controversies, and that's what we're doing right now. But I'm going to leave our viewers tantalized. And how about we continue this conversation in a second interview? What do you say?
I'd love to. I talk about this all the time. I love it.
Okay, well, I'll have you back because this was very interesting.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. Everybody, this has been Management of Reality. We'll see you in the next one. Remember to subscribe, like, and share. Thank you very much.